Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Viewers will notice something right away, and listeners who are not sleeping will notice that it was a man's voice who responded to me and not my usual co-host, Casey. We have a special guest today, John Crowley, who is partner and head of strategy at Fuse Create, which is an amazing agency up in Toronto that we've been doing lots of work with. They, along with Sway Group, are members of Worldwide Partners, which is an independent agency network. And that's how I met the amazing folks at Fuse. And John kind of got himself into this situation of chatting with me. He sent me an email last week, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago at this point, um, sharing a link that had come across his desk, across his phone. I don't know where you saw it. It came across somewhere you were browsing. And it was a link for a service. It's a monthly subscription service where you can buy AI videos, AI generated videos. And he wanted to know my thoughts on that. I promptly responded that I'm going to need to take a minute on this one, and then had the idea. Casey's traveling this week, so I thought it could be fun for us to hash this out live on the podcast. So that's the background. That's why we are here today chatting about this.
And I feel like everyone's having some version of this conversation where like they see an AI use case or an AI demo and they have a moment of like, so how does this mess up my plan for the next 5 years? Like
Yeah.
what do I need to do slightly differently based on this information?
So what? So why don't you? I'm going to punt it to you. What was your thought when you saw this? So I'm going to hang on before you start. I'm going to pull up. So the pricing on this is kind of insane. They have multiple levels of this service, starting at $50 a month. $50 a month gets you 5 AI generated videos a month. You can choose from 300 different realistic AI creators with 35 languages available. So that's $10, less than $10 a video. You pay an extra $20, you get 10 videos a month. And for $119, you get 20 videos a month. So it's certainly cheaper than what we offer here at Sway Group. But I'm wondering, I mean, you're coming from a different perspective, right? I mean, you're coming from a creative agency perspective.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
I mean, when I look at something like that, the first thing I find myself thinking is how is someone going to try to use this to break the current model? Because very often you'll see people, you'll see new technology develop, and Gary Vee got very famous essentially doing this, saying, "Is there a different way I can use this that will break the way this is supposed to work, so I get an unfair share of attention?" And I've seen like kind of, and you and I have actually spoken about the rise of clipping and the rise of like, let me
Yeah.
take this singular piece of content, cut it into a million pieces, and then flood feeds with it in hopes that some of it catches on. Ended up getting a much broader audience that way. So my first thought was someone's going to look at this and they're going to invest the money to create 10,000 versions of realistic seeming people losing it over their product with more and more unhinged scripts behind it. And maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll catch on. And then you enter kind of a different space in terms of like what is the role of the micro influencer? What is the role of someone who like the main offering they have is not so much a dedicated audience as it is a consistent willingness to put out interesting and engaging content that people want to connect with. Now, do I think this is ready for prime time in terms of replacing people? Not really. But my kind of thesis on a lot of this stuff is I see these AI tools hitting the market, and there's always like a vulnerable bottom chunk of pretty much any market where you're kind of creating human slop rather than AI slop. And I'm not saying this to try to be mean to anyone in specific, but
Yeah.
there's like a lower quality, lower end. And part of the concern is if that all becomes entirely automated, what happens to those people that are doing that work currently? And then
Right.
what happens to the strategies that people actually want to use to put things out in market when you can generate 100 times the content for the same budget, and you're dealing with the same impulse we've been facing since the dawn of the internet, which is kind of how do we convince people that spray and pray is not a great strategy for building a brand or building an audience.
Well, I think, I mean, one of the questions I have a newsletter coming. It'll be out by the time this airs. Mark Ritson has been just kind of on a tear lately against influencer marketing, and his latest article had, I mean, a couple of good points, but was just more than a couple bad points. But he was kind of, one of the things that he said in this article was that a concern with doing high volume micro influencer content is that you don't have control over what's being put out there, and that brands have to kind of compromise their brand voice, compromise their quality in order to get the reach that they want through these giant micro influencer campaigns. My position on that is, if you're compromising your brand voice and compromising, your key messages, then you're working with the wrong agency to get that micro influencer work
Mm.
done. That checking that stuff and providing brands an easy way to
Mm-hmm.
review that content and eliminate anything that doesn't fit should be table stakes within this industry. But if there is this assumption that in working with micro influencers, you're losing control of your narrative and there might be stuff you don't want going out there, I can see someone coming from that POV finding this AI model very
Mm.
appealing, because suddenly you are creating the messaging and you're just choosing different avatars to share that, and you're not,
Mm-hmm.
again, like there should not be any control lost, but in this fake model that people think exists, there does feel like there is that lack of control, and I can see something like this feeling almost soothing, which is kind of weird to say when we're
I think
talking
that's
about
a
AI
really interesting
avatars.
point. I I hadn't actually considered how many people would look at this and think, "Oh, finally, I can create influencers and have complete and utter control over everything they're going to say," ignoring the fact that, like, to a certain extent, that misses the point of engaging a creator to work with them on something, and to another extent, like you can actually have very deep, very like comfortable levels of brand safety in terms of the output. Like it's almost solving the wrong problem. But
I think, well, one of the things that I'm seeing, so what you're saying is kind of like why I got into this in the first place and why I love influencer marketing, right? Like, you're finding that exact person who lives in that exact zip code or postal code, as you might say, that you need, who has that exact experience, and they can share their real world perspective of it. Like, so that's kind of like the basis of influencer marketing. But in Mark Ritson has been sharing this stuff because there's been just a lot of announcements, like Unilever saying that half of their marketing spend is going to go towards micro influencer marketing. I mean, we're talking about like huge bulk. And when you're
mhm.
talking about that, it sometimes seems like it's less anymore about finding that authentic voice to tell a meaningful story. And it's become more about, how do we get that massive reach on these platforms where this new audience is spending all of their time, because they're certainly not watching their local news anymore.
I think that's spot on. I do think a lot of the driver for this behavior is basically, can I generate enough volume of content that I can have the presence I want to have on TikTok without needing to, because essentially, like, if you don't have a massive baked in audience, or you're not spending massively to drive yourself up, there is still a subset of people who are just kind of, and I cringe to say this in 2026, their strategy is to make a lot of stuff and hope some of it goes viral. And so I can fully imagine someone looking at tools like this, looking at the ability to crank out a whole bunch of air quotes creator videos with scripts and background imagery of like various perspectives, in an attempt to have enough kicks at the can that hopefully something catches on.
Ugh. That's why I didn't respond to your email, John, because I didn't know how to spell ugh.
The thing that's fascinating about this is like we are almost guaranteed to see some people get this very wrong and people to get it very right in the wrong ways as the experimentation phase continues. We've probably had like a half dozen versions that I've seen of people actually building themselves like a virtual influencer and trying to build a following and trying to make that a big thing. And some of them have been very transparent and some of them have been very manipulative and not transparent. But there's always kind of a backlash at the end when people realize they're being deceived. And there is still, whether or not we want to admit it, there is still a significant, let's say, perception issue when it comes to AI and AI usage for a lot of people. They see this as disingenuous. They see it potentially as a threat. There's a lot of concern about environmental impact. And while you can debate all of those factors to a really significant degree, I mean, you do need to consider that, funnily enough, the people obsessed with brand risk may not be realizing the brand risk of going all in on an approach and a tool set like this.
That's an interesting point. And what about, like, I've seen also some other technologies. A friend of mine, Dory Desjardins, who's one of the founders of Blog Her, calling it way back, she does consulting now. And she said that one of the companies she works, I don't remember if the company that does this reached out to her or one of the companies she worked with was analyzing this technology. But regardless, it was a company that allows you. So the one that you and I were talking about, you pick from these 300 plus
Mm-hmm.
realistic avatars. I'm making air quotes there. The one that she brought to my attention in her post on LinkedIn was one where you create your own avatar. So, you know, I was just at a bar mitzvah last weekend and I was talking to a old friend of my husband's, and we're connected on LinkedIn, and he said, I see all your stuff on LinkedIn. See your stuff all the time. You know, you're doing a great job. I said, thank you. It takes like a ridiculous amount of time. I think I probably spent 40% of my working hours doing thought leadership like that. And so this technology that Jory mentioned, it aims to help with that, where all I would have to do, like right now, all my stuff is basically written except for the podcast. We keep hearing that video works better. So I could take this thought leadership that I'm writing and then take the Danielle avatar and suddenly generate these videos without me having to record the
Mm-hmm.
videos, put the makeup on, do the whole thing. Like, that's becoming a thing too. And that's actually been one of my concerns from the very beginning as we started talking about AI with our influencers. I mean, we've even made some edits to the influencer agreements that
Mm-hmm.
the videos they create can't be a deep fake of themselves. They have to actually create the video.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting concern, and the thing I'm kind of excited to see is it's inevitable. We're going to have a case of a major influencer with a very passionate and engaged following that gets caught generating basically content for a period of time. Like we've already had scandals of people pretending to be places they weren't. Every 6 months, another person finds the BuzzFeed article about the private jet rentals that it never leaves the ground, but you can go on and take photos of yourself on the private jet to show people what a fancy jet setter you are. I fully imagine we will see people, even people who've like built large followings organically through a lot of hard work, realize that to be able to monetize at scale, they can just not do real things and generate a perfect, or a perfect-ish duplicate of themselves. And
Yeah. I mean, I'm
what
thinking
I'm
back
really
to,
interested to, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just thinking about, I don't know, like a couple of years ago, I don't know if you were following this, but at Coachella, not the most recent one, but the Coachella prior to that, there was this kind of controversy because it turns out a lot of the influencers who were posting from Coachella never left the hotel room an hour outside of where the festival was. And they were just posting all the pre party stuff. And like it was just like Coachella vibes without actually going to Coachella. I mean, in this kind of new world that you and I are talking about, I could post my Coachella content from Ann Arbor, Michigan here. Like, I don't even have to go to California to do it.
One of the things I found so interesting is that there's an inherent tension between the reality of it as a business and audience expectations sometimes. And I've seen people, very carefully and passionately choosing the things they're going to work with. And then you start seeing the complaints like this is too many sponsored posts in a row. What happened to the stuff I like joined to connect with? And I think it's going to be really interesting as people try to balance the opportunity to scale up really aggressively the amount of things they're creating with the need to maintain actual relationships and authenticity. And the thing I find most interesting about this stuff is like the idea of creating your AI creators to generate videos based on a pre-existing script. Right now, that's only coming for a certain tier. That's only coming for a certain tier of work. It's right now. Like today, it feels as though it's aiming for a certain tier of influencer work and for a certain tier of influencer. It's going to be really interesting seeing like how this gets adapted by higher tier influencers, but also by celebrities. Like it is not beyond when you live in a world where celebrities are paying people to touch up their Instagram photos so that like their kid's birthday party they look like they have superhumanly flawless skin. It's not that far of a stretch to go from that to well, let's just generate an AI family vacation and then I'll stay in my sweatpants.
My gosh, I had another point I wanted to bring up. Give me a minute here, my brain. Um, one of the things that's interesting to me is that I think, and you and I have talked about this too, there's a way to get this scale that we're talking about and the reach and to have the volume of content that we want to have without resorting to some of this AI technology. And I think that's where I see some interesting, and actually AI could help with some of this stuff, but without bringing fake people into the mix. Like we've talked about, can we take CGC content? So have real people, real influencers create content and then, generate 3 different opening hooks, give us a bunch of B-roll, like just give us all of their raw footage and then pull in an awesome creative agency like Fuse Create and generate a bunch of 15-second, 30-second spots. Like there's a lot you can do with editing and mixing and matching and swapping in different voiceovers. And, I saw a case study a couple of years ago from Uber, and they were using content from the US in China, and they had to blur out some of the street signs because it didn't look appropriate for China content, and they changed the voiceover, like stuff like that. I'm actually okay with, because there's still that one, it's not posted on the influencer's site, so it's not purporting to be like this authentic story, but you're getting a lot of the benefits that these AI tech companies are selling without resorting to fake people, right? Like you're getting volume, you're getting multiple pieces of content, you're getting the
Mm-hmm.
ability to customize, you're getting control over the message. Like I just don't know that we have to kind of go so low in order to get all these benefits that we want to get.
No, I think that's totally fair. I think there's the inherent tension is that if what you're looking for is reach, if what you're looking for is scale, efficiency is playing somewhere in the back of your head, and it's going to be as a pure efficiency decision, we're probably going to lose to AI pretty much every time.
Darn it.
Like I've kind of just I've kind of embraced that as a probable reality that if what is motivating someone is the pursuit of that efficiency, is the pursuit of that scale and that reach, that may not be the argument that we're going to win. But my gut feeling is that if you're looking for nuance, if you're looking for depth, if you're looking for authenticity, if you're looking for connection, it's going to be harder to get that at scale. Like in many ways, I kind of feel like this is going to end up feeling somewhat like banner ads, in that there are things that people do not because they believe that they work, but because they bring a certain level of scale to the universe. And like display advertising is measurable, you can see direct value from it. But if you ask someone, do you think this is what is making people fall in love with your product? I have yet to meet the person who says yes. They're using it for a very specific use case where volume, where efficiency are king. And that's completely fine. The thing that I continue coming back to is the idea that like there will be a volume and efficiency play in pretty much every space. And the question becomes, is that where careers are going to grow? Is that where businesses are going to grow? Or is that going to turn into a bit of a race to the bottom? And then it creates opportunity for people to live in other spaces.
Yeah. I think one of my biggest concerns, there was an article in the New York Times a few months ago about these actors across the country who were hired by Meta to come to California and record in this like weird AI. I don't know if it's weird. I'm calling it weird. In
Mm-hmm.
this AI studio, Meta's basically selling the same thing that this website that you sent me is sending. And they're allowing people who are using Meta Business Manager and the ad manager to go in and generate videos with these avatars who are actually real people, actors from across the country. The article was coming from the perspective of these people, they got paid once, they got paid like a couple $1,000s and their airfare covered, their travel covered. But that video content that they created might be being used by hundreds of brands in all of these ad spots, and they're not getting paid the way an actor would in a commercial. There's no kind of residuals or anything like that. And I mean, the bigger issue with this article was that these people they did not seem like they were fully looped in by Meta
Yeah.
on exactly the use case of this. But
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, it always scares me when the platforms themselves start to play around with this technology and offer this up, because that's when it gains scale and kind of takes over.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's an inherent limiting factor to some of this, though, which is, do people want their entire feed to be filled with artificial people? And all indications that I'm seeing so far is no. And so it's an interesting tension because, like, if anything is going to stop, AI generated content from playing a bigger and bigger role on these channels, it's going to be when it starts hitting these platforms in the wallet and they start going, oh, we're actually having less time on site, so we can sell less advertising because people are less engaged in our content product.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's going to
I
engage
mean, I
people
hope
more?
I hope people don't like, I mean, people like the talking babies and the funny, weird AI animal stuff.
I have seen a lot of intentionally hilarious content that's been made using AI, and I think there's not like I feel like I've said there's nothing wrong with that about 35 times already in this
Yeah.
conversation. But I do a big thing for me is like observation shouldn't involve a ton of value judgment. You need to actually make sure you understand what you're looking at, and then you can decide whether it's good, bad, or neutral. And I don't think this is inherently bad. I do think it's very disruptive, and I think value is going to migrate to different spaces. So I can fully imagine this becoming a subset of performance media. And you're going to have specific players generating a whole bunch of these assets, treating them as ad units the same way they'd treat a targeted search buy, or they'd treat like a Google, like a Google advertising buy. Not so much focused on depth of message or building a deep relationship, but focused on let's get out there and convert. Let's get people engaging with this, and it makes sense where people are spending their time. But I do think it will require a bit of a rethinking of where the opportunity lies. A, for human influencers, and B, for influencer marketing.
Whew. Well, I don't know that we solved anything, but this was fun.
I mean, the fun part about stuff like this is you can solve the problem 12 times a week because the problem keeps evolving and changing.
Right? Yeah. True story. True
Mm-hmm.
story. Well, this was awesome. Thank you for coming up. Thank you for sending me that article and giving me this idea. It was nice to chat with you about it.
My pleasure. It's good to chat with you, and I appreciate the conversation. I think this is something we're going to be figuring out in a lot of ways for a long time. Like, we have
Yeah.
a lot of conversations internally about the role of AI in the creative process, the role of AI in the production process. We actually recently did our first full AI spot, and it was
I was gonna mention that. Yeah.
yeah, it's for a charity called Souls for Souls. Our creative department did a fantastic job, and what was interesting about it is people hear we used AI and they assume the idea was let's use AI. The idea and the script and the concept were all developed entirely independently of that decision. And then we looked
By
into
real
production.
humans.
Yeah, by real humans who I work with every day. And the script was developed, the concept was put together, we figured out what we wanted, we got client buy-in, And then we need to figure out how to actually bring it to life. And we looked at a series of options and we realized there were actually a lot of advantages to working with a production house that uses AI as a tool to achieve certain outcomes. What's fascinating is the immediate response from some people to hearing, we did this in AI is just like, oh, so your creative team didn't work on this? I'm like, no, they worked on it a ton. They were reviewing every single frame. They reworked things a dozen times to ensure we could get exactly what we wanted. And so when I think about that, and when I think about this space, I can imagine a world where there's very intentional AI creators that are using AI and maybe even using AI of themselves to transparently develop work that achieves a singular vision they have, that delivers what they want to deliver to their community. And then that's a great value exchange and everyone's delighted. I can also imagine a lot of people cranking out slop as quickly as possible in an attempt to basically dominate through scale. And it's going to be interesting to see what the response to that is.
Okay, well, we will stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Good to chat with you, Danielle.
Bye bye.
Bye.